This is the POV underwater video that no one on the internet dares to watch to the end. A 22-year-old diving instructor ignored all warnings and dove alone into the depths of the blue hole. He originally wanted to use his helmet camera to record a new personal best, but 7 minutes into the dive, the footage suddenly spirals out of control. He frantically tries to inflate his buoyancy device, but nothing can stop his freefall. Nobody knew what he encountered at the bottom of the sea, 115 meters down, until they found the tape. This is the story of the Dahab Blue Hole diving tragedy. The Dahab Blue Hole is located on the southeast coast of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, along the Red Sea, just a few miles north of the city of Dahab. It's a natural sinkhole formed during the Ice Age when a limestone cave collapsed and flooded with seawater. The surface opening is about 50 to 80 meters across, and the hole drops straight down to a depth of about 100 meters. At 55 meters down the wall, there is a 26-meter-long natural rock tunnel known as the Arch. The bottom of the arch slopes outward toward the open ocean down to 120 meters, and once outside, the seafloor abruptly drops off to over 1,000 meters deep. Authorities have strictly classified this as a high-risk technical dive site. Recreational divers are limited to a maximum depth of 40 meters and are expressly forbidden from going down to the arch or attempting to swim through the tunnel. On April 28, 2000, Yuri Lipsky, a 22-year-old diving instructor from Israel, arrived at the site looking to shatter his personal deep diving record. Yuri was a certified recreational diving instructor with years of experience, and he had previously completed several deep dives that pushed past standard recreational limits. To film this record-breaking attempt, he reached out to Tariq Omar, the most renowned local technical diver and officially authorized recovery expert, asking him to act as a guide and support diver. After hearing Yuri's plan, Omar flat out refused. He made it crystal clear that the 55-meter arch area was strictly for professional technical diving. With only recreational certifications and training, Yuri was completely unequipped to handle the immense pressure and complex terrain at that depth. Omar laid out his terms. Yuri needed to complete a 2-week specialized technical diving course, covering mixed gas diving, stage decompression procedures, and emergency protocols, before even attempting the dive with a full support team. Yuri replied that he was only in town for the weekend and didn't have time for a lengthy training program. Ultimately, he brushed off Omar's professional advice and decided to sneak out and do the dive entirely on his own. That afternoon, Yuri entered the water alone from the edge of the blue hole and began his vertical descent along the wall. Everything seemed normal at first. His descent rate was steady, and the sunlight filtering through the water in the footage was still bright and clear. However, Yuri's gear was wildly inadequate for a deep dive. He brought only a single 12-liter tank of regular compressed air. He didn't have any stage decompression tanks or an emergency heliox mix. For context, a 100-meter technical dive typically requires 3 to 4 tanks of different gas mixtures just to return to the surface safely. Furthermore, to overcome his natural buoyancy and speed up his descent, he strapped 12 kilograms of lead weights to his waist. Combined with the weight of his tank and gear, he was carrying way too much weight. Most importantly, he had no surface support team, no dive buddy, and hadn't logged his dive plan with the reserve authorities. Plain and simple, this was a highly dangerous rogue solo dive. As he went deeper and the water pressure mounted, the massive amount of extra weight caused his descent rate to spiral out of control. By international standards, the absolute maximum depth for recreational diving is 40 meters. Once Yuri passed the 50-meter mark, he entered the high-risk zone. At this point, his movements began to show slight incoordination, and his swimming posture became noticeably unstable. Yet, instead of turning back, he kept swimming downward. Crossing the 70-meter mark, the compressed air triggered moderate nitrogen narcosis. At this stage, divers commonly suffer from cognitive impairment, spatial disorientation, and even a bizarre sense of euphoria and blind confidence. They lose the ability to accurately gauge their own physical state and the extreme danger they are in. This is the hidden, fatal trap in almost all deep-water diving accidents. By the time the narcosis hit full force at 81 meters, his descent had sped up dramatically and his limbs were flailing. Finally, at a depth of 91 meters, Yuri slammed into the sloping floor of the sinkhole. He tried repeatedly to inflate his buoyancy control device to stop his fall, but the inflator malfunctioned. The device was completely useless. Dragged down by the excessive lead weights, he couldn't stop sinking. He slid helplessly down the slope until he hit the absolute bottom at 115 meters. When other divers and dive shop staff on the shore noticed something was wrong, they immediately contacted local authorities and Tariq Omar's recovery team. But the sun was already setting. Doing a deep water body recovery at night is incredibly dangerous, especially with no lighting or surface support, so the official search had to wait until morning. The next day, at the personal plea of Yuri's mother, Omar led the recovery mission. Knowing the underwater layout of the Blue Hole better than anyone, Omar followed the wall down and eventually found Yuri's body on the bottom slope at 115 meters. To Omar's shock, the helmet camera was still perfectly mounted to Yuri's gear. Even though this commercial camera was only rated for 75 meters, it somehow survived the crushing pressure at 115 meters, and its memory card was perfectly readable. In later interviews, Omar confessed that had he known the camera held a complete recording of the accident while he was underwater, he would have smashed it right there on the seafloor. He didn't want a mother to have to watch the horrifying final moments of her son's life. But while sorting through his belongings, Yuri's mother insisted on seeing the footage, and she eventually watched the tragedy unfold in its entirety. At a depth of 115 meters, the absolute pressure is a crushing 12.5 atmospheres. It is painfully obvious from the video that Yuri was suffering from severe nitrogen narcosis. Under its heavy influence, he experienced severe confusion, hallucinations, and a total loss of the ability to save himself. On top of that, breathing regular air at that depth means the partial pressure of oxygen is fatally high, leading to a massive risk of acute central nervous system oxygen toxicity. When analyzing the footage later, Omar noted that Yuri appeared to suffer convulsions at the bottom, a textbook symptom of acute oxygen toxicity, which only made his loss of control worse. The video shows Yuri in a state of absolute panic on the seafloor, desperately but fruitlessly fiddling with his gear, unable to reverse his descent. Finally, as his air ran out, he slowly faded away. This POV video remains one of the few complete first-hand recordings of a fatal deep-sea diving accident in human history. It serves as a brutal, visceral demonstration of just how stealthy and deadly nitrogen narcosis can be, shattering the dangerous myth held by many divers that, as long as I have enough experience, I can handle the depth.